Hello. As well as a practicing psychologist, I've also been married for 24 years and have two children who are 20 and 18. Just come back from Canberra. We both went down for a parents' weekend at ANU. Beautifully seeing my son in college. So I left in tears. Husband left, the normal thing, just patting me. He'll be all right. Not worried about him, just me. Missing him dreadfully. Am I echoing too much? Is that okay? Might turn that for a second. Okay, let's get into it. I want to tell you all about Tom and explain why there are three monkeys up there. Tom is married to Sophie, and he has been for about 10 years. They've always been pretty rocky in their marriage. They really love each other and they both want it to work. And incidentally, we know that couples who fight a lot, not talking obviously any abuse or violence, but couples who fight a lot don't necessarily have a doomed marriage. Some couples have quite a volatile relationship and that works well for them. Other couples avoid arguments at all costs and that works well for them. So back to Tom and Sophie. One of the biggest triggers for the arguments they have is how they parent Frank. Now Frank is 8 and Frank is, shall we say, tricky. He's always been tricky. Been a lot of people who've talked about how tricky Frank is. His mother, his grandparents, his preschool teachers, and now his teachers at school. Sophie finds Frank really, really difficult. She finds it so stressful being around him. Even weekends and holidays aren't restful for Sophie because she's still dealing with Frank. And when she wants to try and discipline Frank or bring his behaviour into line, then she wants Tom to back her up. Even she'd love him to step in and sometimes be the bad cop, but if not, at least when she's disciplining him, could he back her up? Over the years it's been suggested he go to speech pathology, OT, child psychologist, child psychiatrist. Sophie takes him to all these appointments on her own and then comes back and tells Tom all about what the experts have suggested. And she's tried all these strategies, but she still finds him tricky. There's often calls from the school, please can you come up and have a meeting about Frank? And she goes on her own and then goes back and tells Tom all about him. So, as you can see, Sophie's finding it so difficult to be with Frank. The trouble is, Tom doesn't have a problem with Frank at all. He thinks, you can't hear? A bit louder? Amara? A bit louder? Maybe if I stand here then I'll do. Is that better? Yes. Okay, I'll lean in. Anyway, so Tom doesn't have a problem with Frank at all. As far as he's concerned, if Frank wants an ice cream, he should have an ice cream. Tantrum over. If Frank doesn't want to do his homework, he shouldn't have to do his homework. If he doesn't want to go to bed yet, he should be able to stay up with them. This is annoying, isn't it? Sorry. So the trouble is, in Frank's mind, he can see no evil. Not in a biblical sense, but he can see no evil when it comes to Frank. I'm going to come back to Tom in a few minutes, but I first want to tell you about Philip. Philip is married to Annette and has been for about 10 years. They've got 2 children and they were really, really happy for the first 5 years. But about 5 years ago, Annette started to become unhappy. She wasn't seeing anything of Philip. He had and still has a humongous job, works really long hours, normally gets home about 9:30, has a bit of dinner, then he wants to do a little bit more work before he collapses into bed about midnight. He really travels a lot and so he's again really tired, too tired to come home and talk about his day or hear about hers. Don't get me wrong, he loves his children, he's very hands-on. On the weekend he loves nothing more than playing with his children. He takes his older child when he's not travelling to sport and he does a birthday party run whenever he can. But Annette is really, really lonely. She really misses him, and when she started to become unhappy, she did the right thing. She spoke up. She said to Philip that she loves him, that she misses him, that she wanted to spend more time with him. She said she knew that he loved his kids, but she didn't know whether he loved her. He thinks that she's fabulous. He loves her, he thinks she's sexy and intelligent and funny, he thinks they'll be together forever. But she's not sure. So even though she did the right thing and she spoke to him over and over again, Philip could hear no evil. All the suspense, what's going to happen to Philip and Annette, what's happening to Tom and Sophie while I'm talking about Philip and Annette. I just have to tell you about Connor. Connor's been married to Louise for about 10 years. They've got 3 kids under the age of about 4.5. It's a pretty busy household. Louise does most of the caring and the running of most caring for the kids and the running of the house. She pays the bills, does all the washing and a lot of the cleaning. But Connor is no slouch. He's right in there. He does the cooking every night. He gets up to any of the children if they're upset during the night, which they often are. He takes them to their medical appointments and helps nurse them back to health. He lets Louise sleep in on the mornings, on the weekend mornings, so he gets up to the children. You think I'm making this up, don't you? But it's true. Connor is, only the names have been changed. Connor's never pressured Louise for sex, even though they both admit that they'd only had sex twice in the past 2 years. He makes a fuss about her birthdays and anniversary. He notices when she gets a haircut. Marvellous. He encouraged her to see her girlfriends. He puts up with her mother and her mother's dramas. In other words, Connor is a little bit too good to be true, but he is that good. But Louise doesn't think so. You see, Louise is really unhappy. She thinks Connor should work from home 1 or 2 days a week. And even though he leaves work about 5:30, so he's home by about 6, she doesn't think that's early enough. She really thinks he should be the one paying the bills, he should be the one ringing the plumber, and he should be there when the plumber comes to fix the leaking tap. She really thinks he should say no to any work function because he needs to be with the kids. She's constantly telling Connor that he needs to do more. She's constantly on his back telling him to lift his game. She's telling him he's irresponsible. She's telling him that he's not putting in enough effort. And she wants me to tell him to step up his effort. And she gets very angry when I don't tell him that. You see, Connor is drowning. He can't cope with everything on his plate. He's got his boss on his back because he's slipping out of work all the time and taking calls and not attending any functions. And then he comes home and Louise is really unhappy with him and always on his back. But does Connor say anything? No, because Connor can speak no evil. Now, I'm not saying all men are monkeys. I'm not. I promise I'm not. But to survive the rocky path that sometimes is a long-term relationship, you need to be able to see evil and hear evil and speak evil. Because Tom, Philip and Connor's marriages are in serious trouble. But they can all be turned around. So you want to think about your own relationships. If your partner isn't seeing what's wrong, you need to find another way to show them. You need to watch out for when your partner is trying to tell you that something is wrong. And if your partner is not speaking up, you need to help him or her find their voice. I want to spend this presentation just giving you an outline of the skills that I teach couples in my little office. And these are the skills that help to build a strong marriage. And it's whether you're engaged or whether you've been in a relationship marriage for a long time, whether your relationship might be in a little bit of trouble or whether it's going really smoothly. These skills will help in hopefully, all of those areas. Starting with the number one, as far as I'm concerned, building block, and that's commitment. Obviously, without commitment, a marriage isn't going to work. And the definition of commitment I like to use is it's a decision. It's a decision is that you are the person that I've chosen to spend my life with. Everything I do and say will reflect that decision. Because there's no such thing as half a commitment. It's black or white. You're either committed or you're not. And when the life gets tough and when you've got challenges together, it's a commitment that enables you to work together to conquer those challenges. Without that commitment, then the incentive is not there. But it takes both people to be committed. That is the sad thing, that sometimes one person is truly committed and the other person's not, and it's going to be very hard unless they both are. Incidentally, there's something in psychobabble land where I live called commitment phobia, which a lot of people think is when somebody is afraid to commit because they, or have a general idea of commitment is bad. It's actually a fear of abandonment. So what I often see in couples is somebody might really love this person they're seeing, but the more they love them, the more they fear they're going to be hurt. And it normally comes from the fact that they've been hurt badly themselves, or they've witnessed someone close to them being hurt. Maybe their parents had a really tough time. And so what they do is they try not to get hurt themselves. Sorry, is that buzzing in everyone's ears, or you're right? Is it all right back there, Anne? Yeah, I just did. Anyway, because it's a decision, I like to think of, and for those of you, and I can see the majority of the room already are probably married, but I like to see marriage as being, you make this decision based on some essential ingredients, love being an obvious one. But we all know love is not enough. You also need chemistry and attraction, shared values, shared mindsets, some shared goals and dreams, and time to know and accept each other's faults. You don't all have to vote the same way. You don't have to have every interest that's the same. But you do need to think of life in the same way. You do need to prioritise things in the same way, because as I said, love is not enough. One thing I should have put up there, and I really believe this is another essential ingredient, is, am I a better person because I'm in this relationship? I don't believe in, personally I have a problem with that, we're two halves of one whole. I don't think you're half a person. I don't think single people are half people. But I think you're a better person because of this. This person brings out the best in you. So if they are, in my case, my husband's very, very laid back and relaxed, and as I said, I cry as soon as we leave Canberra. I'm wondering, worrying about my son. That's a really lovely balance, I think. If one person's madly spends money and the other one saves, that really balances out well, because the spender can let the saver learn to live a little, and the saver can keep the spender in check. So you want to be each other's fans because of what you both bring to the relationship and both bring to each other. So I often say to couples, if you find you don't like yourself when you're in this relationship, you've never been jealous before, you've never been angry or insecure, and suddenly you are, then perhaps that needs to be looked at, because, as I said, this relationship should make you even better. Really important to remember to have realistic expectations. This idea, we all come in, without even knowing it, we come into a relationship with a series of expectations. We come into it from our relationship history and often our families of origin. That's what we think, that's the model that we've come from. But the other part where expectations form a role is we often base our expectation of the whole relationship on the early days. That bubble of new love, that wonderful time when it's so intense. That other person is all you can think of. What are they doing? Where are they? How long? I haven't answered my text. When am I going to see them again? And it's really wonderful. It's filled with chemistry and emotion, that animal magnetism. It's so intense physically and emotionally. You're sort of oblivious to the rest of the world. Now, the bubble that surrounds that new love is really important. It's got this amazing job to do. It's there to protect that couple from the pressures of the outside world, from the stress of work or from friends and family. It really protects you, but it has to burst at some point. And it's good when it bursts, because then it enters into this mature phase, the long-term mature phase of the relationship. And you need to know what that's like, I think, before you commit. You need to road test this relationship in real life. That's why generally it's not a good idea to marry someone you've just met on holidays, get engaged within 10 days. Sometimes some people have said it works, but generally speaking, you need to bring it back and road test it in real life. How do you get on with this person's friends and family? How do they treat their friends and family? How do they treat a waiter in a restaurant? I always think that's a good little indicator of what this person's like. So you also, as I said, have time to get to know each other, get to know each other's faults. You can only do that once that bubble's popped. Sometimes, though, the bubble unfortunately does pop a bit early if you go through a crisis, if there's a death in the family or a serious illness or unemployment, something like that, and the bubble can pop, and that way the couple very quickly has to grow up. The relationship has to grow up very quickly, but it's still important to embrace the good stuff, which is the mature stage of the relationship. Another skill, validation. As I said, remember, I live in psychobabble land, so I'll use all these words that we trot out in psychology. Validation. For those of you who've heard my talks, have heard me probably dob in my friend Ed. This is a girlfriend of mine who we go for coffee whenever we can, and we go to cafes all over the place. And wherever we go, when we sit down to order, she says to the wait staff, "Can I have a skim cappuccino extra hot? Burning mouth hot. Do you understand?" And the waiter might sound, "Yes, freak." Sure. And I say, "I'll just have a coffee, thanks." Normal temperature coffee. Anyway, without doubt, over 15 years, whenever that coffee arrives, she takes a sip and says, "Not hot enough." Every time. Now, in the early days, I used to say to her, "Oh, why don't you order another one, or I'll get you another one." Or I'd say, "Listen, they probably don't want to serve you a burning mouth coffee because if you spill it, you're going to sue them." Or, "Do you know, in Italy, cappuccinos aren't meant to be burning hot. They're meant to be lukewarm and drunk before 12. Anything at all would prompt her to give a 20-minute talk on why she likes her coffee hot, which, let's face it, is not very interesting. So I had to learn and preach, live what I preach, which is to say something like, "Well, you couldn't have said it any clearer," or "I heard you," just something like that, to validate the fact that she's frustrated that her coffee's not hot enough. And then she says, "Oh, anyway, how are you?" And we get on to important matters that need to be discussed. So that validation is really important. Another, I just quickly dob in my husband, who incidentally was lovely because he did manage to get this presentation to Anne, so that was good. I mean, he is lovely anyway, gosh, don't get me wrong. But I am going to complain about him because he rang one time last year when I was, we were meant to be meeting somewhere at 7 o'clock for an extended family dinner, and he rang from work. I was already at home, and he said, "What time are we meant to be there?" And I said, 7, in that manner. And he said, "What's wrong?" I said, "Because for the last hour and a half trying to download these photos into Dropbox." Does anyone know Dropbox? Dreadful thing. As I said, very valuable for today, but I find it very, very frustrating that somebody had sent me photos and I was trying to download it, I couldn't do it. And Andy said, "Well, do you need it for tonight?" And I said, no, but I've just spent an hour and a half and I just want to get it done." "Well, it looks like you're really stressing yourself to try and do it." "No, just leave it, I'll do it when I get home." No. Anyway, don't worry, bye." That's me, hanging up. Very bad. Anyway, as I pointed out to him later, what he needed to say was, "Yes, it can be very frustrating." Quite simple, Andy, quite simple. At which point I would have said, "Yes, well, I'll just leave it for you when you get home because you'll be able to do it in a second." See? Happy days. One other really final story that I'll just tell to illustrate this, which was, I just thought, such a moving story, and I did tell it in Melbourne for those who were there last year. This client of mine, beautiful, beautiful woman that I see, has adult children, and her son, who's in his 40s, whenever they get together as adults, because they live all over the place, he gets very angry, often very angry around his parents and his adult sister and their partners. And she couldn't work out why, and so she was talking to me about this because she'd just come back from a trip to somewhere where they'd all been together, and she said, "It's so frustrating, he's such a lovely man, but he gets so angry when we're all together." And I said, "Well, why do you think that would be?" And she said, "Well, one thing he keeps bringing up over the years is this incident." She said, when he was 5. And when he was 5 and his little sister was 3, they'd been somewhere as tourists. And the parents had said to the kids, "Hey, in this little souvenir shop," you know how you have to go through that to get to the exit, and in the souvenir shop, and the parents said, "Go and choose something, anything you want, and you can have that as a souvenir." And he went racing over and came back with this cat mug. Cat on it. He said, "Oh, I'd like this, Mummy." And his little sister said, "I want the cat mug." And so they said, "Oh, darling, can you give your sister the cat mug?" And he said, "Oh, no, I really want the cat mug." And they tried to find another one. There's only one cat mug left. And they said, come on, mate, you've got to choose something else. Come on, give it to your sister. Please choose something else. And he was very, very upset, and they chose something for him and he walked out. Now, over the years, we're talking 40 years, he has brought up this cat mug. Now, my lovely, lovely client has said to him, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that you didn't have the cat mug. So she's apologised. She said, why is it so hard for you? Why can't you move on? Why do you keep bringing this up? Why are you so angry? Do you want to go and see somebody? Do you want to take something? I'll go anywhere. What do you want to do? And he would shut her down every time. So I suggested to her, and I said, well, perhaps he hasn't ever felt validated. Why don't you just say to him, because I asked her, why do you think he's upset? And she said, because I think he thought that we loved his sister more than him. I said, why don't you say that? Why don't you say, hey, I was thinking about it. I'm wondering whether the incident, the cat mug, the notorious cat mug incident, is upsetting because you thought we loved your sister more than you. Just see what he says when you said that. So she goes home, she rings him up and she says exactly that. And he said, oh yes, thanks mum, and changed the subject. And she very cleverly said, no, can you hear me? I'm saying I really understand why you must have been hurt, that you thought we loved your sister more than you. Big mistake. We should have given you the cat mug, but I really understand why you're upset. Anyway, he broke down in tears. She said she cannot remember the last time she'd ever seen him cry. This was on the phone. But he sobbed for 20 minutes and said, thanks, Mum. Really powerful story that shows the importance of validation. And the point is, if we don't feel validated in our relationships, we don't feel heard. And so we really need to start this validation. So what I want to do is just for you to practice this in a really not heavy way. You don't have to talk about your innermost feelings. So just a really simple example, and we've roped Susan in. If Susan would like to come up, and I'm just going to demonstrate what I'd love you to do, and then if you could just spend a few minutes either with your partner, or if you're here on your own, if you wouldn't mind matching up with another person on their own, or I can be your partner, and we can just practice, because the key with validation, it's quite hard. And this is called a tight tracking exercise that Susan and I are about to do, because you're not allowed to ask any questions. You're only allowed to have statements back again and lots of pauses. And why I say that is because when I gave that cat mug example, as I said, she'd apologise, but she'd also asked him questions. Why is it so hard? Why are you still angry? Why can't you let it go? And if she just said the statement, as I said, this is what I'm understanding, it feels much better. So do you want to come to the microphone here? Thank you, Susan. So you can start with a question. So this is what I'd love you to practice, just something really simple. Susan, how's your weekend going?
I'm getting very, very tired. Very tired.
You're very exhausted.
Yes, I didn't get very much sleep last night. I had my grandchildren over, and the little one's only 3 months old, so they're still on 3 early feeds.
Gosh.
So up every 3 hours, and then poor Cassidy, she woke up and she needed a nappy changed and another bottle, and being out of her familiar surroundings, and I was up with her, and then I took her into our bed, and it was just so exhausting.
Well, no wonder you're exhausted. It sounds exhausting. It sounds like you're really there for your grandchildren.
I was, and I feel like now I'm not so there for everybody else.
So it sometimes feels like you're letting other people down when you're helping someone.
Well, I take my responsibility as grandma very seriously, and I think that they need to be first. But sometimes I think I need to put myself first and prioritise my work, because I tend to put myself last.
The very last priority.
But that's grandmothers for you.
That's wonderful grandmothers for you.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Susan. That's great. I don't know what you found. I did make a mistake then, didn't I? I put in a suggestion that she might be feeling, guilty about that. So don't do that. Naughty. But it's really hard, because I don't know about you, but I'm dying to ask things about the grandchildren and Cassie, there were lots of questions that I could ask and things that I'd like to say, oh yes, I remember that when I was young, you know, if my kids were young and say all these things, but you couldn't. Just sitting with it sometimes is really difficult. Lots of pauses. Sometimes there's nothing there, because if you pause, it's the same in you know, a lot of you doing counselling. If you pause, it enables the other person to keep talking, invites them in. Whereas if you jump in too quickly with your suggestions or your summing up, so you're game to just, as I said, no one's going to hear, just between the two of you, can you just practice? As I said, you can say something about the weather. You can say something about the traffic, or, you know, whether you're tired. It doesn't have to be anything about I'm tired, I'm down, I'm angry, I'm frustrated. It doesn't have to be any emotion at all. It can just be a statement. Okay, do you know what I mean? Okay, can I ask just for a few minutes to practice that? Is there anyone? Now, a very good friend of validation is empathy. This is the biggie. If there is one thing that you could take away from today, is knowing even more than you already do what empathy looks like. Because empathy is the magic ingredient, I think, in a relationship and communication. It's this, the definition I like to use is it's entering into the spirit of the other person. Okay, it's not imagining about what you would do in that situation. It's not remembering what you did. It's not feeling pity for that person. It's really trying to enter into their spirit, so it's their personality and their situation. Another story I often tell, so again, forgive me if you've heard it, but this happened some years ago now. But we were, a whole group of us, about 10, 12 families, were having a massive barbecue day down at Balmoral. I'm down at Bowral, so you know, a couple of an hour and a half out of Sydney. And we're all driving down in our family groups, and we all divvied up who was going to bring what. And the woman who had the very important job of bringing the nibbles was late. And you can imagine, the nibbles, they come first, so she needs to be there. Now, when she was late and had been getting on a bit, we obviously started worrying, because perhaps she'd had a car accident. So of course, we're all concerned. Now, we'd phoned her and texted her, and she'd done the right thing and not answered because she was driving. So she arrived about 2 hours late, and it was quite clear when a group of us, including myself, a group of women, walked over to her that she'd been crying, and so had her 4 children. And it turned out that her parents' dog that she'd been minding while they were on a trip around Australia had been run over the night before. And they'd found the poor little puppy, or he was a dog, but found him, and they had to bury him. And she was now having to decide whether to ring her parents on their trip and interrupt their trip and tell them the sad news. So she's telling this story through floods of tears. And what happened next was so interesting to me as a psychologist, because one woman said, that happened to me. I was minding my parents' cat one year and it got killed. I did decide to ring my parents, she said, because they were really thankful that I rang, so I think you should ring your parents and tell them about the dog. Another woman couldn't wait. She was just getting quite anxious for the cat story to finish so she could tell her story, which was the fact that she'd lost her own dog about 12 months ago and died, and she still wasn't over her dog's death. She really missed her dog. A third woman said, did you find out who did it? Perhaps you could do some signs. You could write some signs. Did anyone call for witnesses and work out, you know, could they have done something? Could there was CPR on the dog or something? Or at least make them pay for something. Could you do that? And then the fourth one, which I thought was the absolute pearler, she said, you can't blame yourself. It's not your fault that the dog died. It was an accident. At which point this woman said, well, I hadn't blamed myself until you'd said that, but thank you anyway. So all I could see is this very distressed woman saying, I'm sorry about your mum's cat, sorry about your dog, thank you, I'll think about the notices. No, I hadn't blamed myself. So she was suddenly comforting everybody, when clearly all she needed was a hug or an arm around her back and, or can we get you a cup of tea? Okay, that's what empathy's like. So here's some well-meaning people, you know, loving, well-meaning people, just not doing empathy very well. And we hear about it all the time, don't you? I know any of my clients who are battling through grief or they're battling cancer, that we collect them. I've got a board, and we collect the clangers they get. that people who are going through such hard times and the things that they hear. Oh, well, had a good innings. It's a very common one. It must be a relief. At least there's not as much caring to be done now because obviously it was hard at the end. Or, have you started, once you learn to play bridge or anything? Everybody's wanting to make suggestions and yes, I've been in that boat and this is what I did. And again, none of it is empathy. Empathy is really, as I said, entering into the spirit of that person. It doesn't matter what you would do. It doesn't matter what you did. It's finding out what this person needs. Let me show you how empathy goes a long, long way. Here's a typical household. Hi honey, I'm home. About time, I've had the worst day. The kids are driving me nuts. You've had the worst day. I can't begin to tell you about the day I've had. I was abused in front of the whole team. Well, I bet you had time to grab a coffee. Don't start that again. I'd love to be home with the kids. You're welcome to it. Let's look at the same scenario with a touch of empathy. Hi honey, I'm home. About time, I've had the worst day. The kids are driving me nuts. Oh no, I can see how stressed you are. What have they been doing? Fighting and not doing what they're told. You poor thing, that sounds like a shocker. What can I do? Can you bath the twins? But how was your day? I've had a bit of a shocker too, but I'll tell you about it later. Let's get them up to bed early so we can relax together. You can see which couple are going to have a smoother night, can't you? Let's look at another phone. Oh, here's another. Isn't that cute? See, he gets it. Okay, here's a couple on the phone. Remember I'll be late tonight because I have my course. Okay, I'll have to change a meeting, but I'll get home in time. I don't really want to go, I'm struggling with it. You can't quit now, I've given up a lot for you. I've given up a lot to give you time to go. Sorry if I've inconvenienced you. We can't afford for you to keep starting things and not finishing. She hangs up. Let's add a little pinch of empathy. Remember, I'll be late tonight because I have my course. Okay, I'll have to change a meeting, but I'll get home in time. I don't really want to go, I'm struggling with it. Why are you struggling? I don't know, I'm just not motivated. You've got a lot on your plate with the kids in your study. What do you want to do? I'm not sure. I'll go along tonight and see how I go. Good idea. See you when I get home. When you get home. Again, which couple is going to have the nicer evening? Yes. So it's amazing. We talk, don't we, all the time about anyone who's working with couples, or if you're in a couple where all this cliche about conflict resolution. How can you get to the core of the problem when often the problem won't even start? The fight won't even start if you add some empathy in the early stages. So it's, as I said, one thing you can take away, it's more clarity on empathy. The next one, filling the rain tank. Really important in a relationship. As I've said, and we all know, long-term relationships have their challenges, but they're worth it. There are always hurdles to jump, and dealing with any issues that come along are draining. It's like the relationship has this rain tank attached to it. There's a little tap on the side, and every time there's an issue, it's open and the water goes flowing out. So you need to have enough going in the top of the rain tank to be able to cope with the draining nature of everyday life. So for that relationship to grow, you've got to work out ways to fill your rain tank. If there's nothing in the tank, then that's when you can often feel like you're stuck or in a rut because it's just run dry. So you've got to think of ways to fill that relationship tank. Turn off the TV and go for and eat together. Go for a walk, have sex, play Scrabble, give a massage without sex, go away for a night, go away for a week, watch a movie together, laugh, visit old haunts, look over old photos. And these sort of thing, again, cliched, I love that there's a voucher here to go and have lunch. That's a lovely way to have dessert, wasn't it? Even better. To have some couple time. It's good to do it when you're in a really good place. to think of the list and do these things. Whereas, again, I think the common strategy is, okay, you're in a crisis, you go along to marriage couples and marriage counselling, they say, you're going to go have a date night. And what's the point of a date night if you're going to sit there and fight and you're going to be have a dreadful time? It's like, I don't know if any of you play golf, but I play golf and I've got this motto not to do any practice swings and never to practice in the nets or in the driving range, because why practice something that's terrible, you know? So, and it's the same with a date night, you know? It's really good to go on date nights and have or as I said, not even go out because that can be expensive, but to stay home and laugh. It's always a good thing. Lighten things up so that you do have enough in the rain tank. So what I'd love you to do again, you don't have to write anything down, but I'd just like you to turn to each other, and if you're here on your own, to just have take a mental note of what things that are just specific to you and your relationship that you've forgotten to do for a while, that would be really good to fill that rain tank out, starting from, you know, this week. So just for a few seconds, just have a talk to each other or think, just to, please. Okay, so that would be good to, as I said, to start practicing. And it doesn't have to be, I think some people think that they have to, every Wednesday night is date night, and we have to do something, we have to play Scrabble, or we have to watch a movie, and then as soon as one person has to pull out of it, then the resentment can grow because you pulled out a date night. So if you can have lots of examples where some things are only a small, you know, going for a walk, and some things are a long thing like a week away together every 5 years, that would be great. Another strategy, really important in a relationship, to be two adults. Now that might sound ridiculous, of course you're adults. But when someone, this is a dynamic which I'm sure a lot of you are aware of, when someone around us is upset, we tend to comfort them, we tend to nurture them, wrap our arms around them. Okay, we become somewhat as a parent in that situation. And if someone gets really angry with us, even if it's a stranger, a road rage incident, or you're walking down the street and someone, maybe with a mental health illness, starts, you know, screaming abuse at you, you can tend to feel a bit frightened, a bit like a child in that instant. And that's really good. You know, that's perfectly normal to have that parent in us, and whether we have children or not, or that child in us. But they're just moments in time. The rest of the time we need to stay adult. And the adult is this logical, decision-making machine. And that's what you want to stay in. And then you just slip into parent mode when it's necessary to comfort someone or to chastise a child, or you go into a child mode when you're excited or happy, or you're angry or sad, or you've got some sort of emotion. So it's a point of in a couple, you want to stay two adults, and then, as I said, slip into the parent and child when it's necessary. But a very common unhealthy dynamic is when you've got a parent and child. When one person is often talking down to the other one and condescending and saying things like, oh, it's like I've got a fourth child in the house. And the other one's feeling like they don't have any respect from the person. They're always feeling like they're being treated like a child. So this is really something to watch, because over time resentment can build up. And the intimacy and attraction fades, and the relationship can be in trouble. You've got to think about how you speak to your partner. Do you ever talk to them as if they were a child? Would you ever speak this way to a close friend? Would you talk this way or react this way if a workmate asked you for help? Because, you know, believe it or not, what's sad is we often treat our friends and our workmates better than we treat our partners. That's because we often stay adult with our friends and family and workmates. In a clinical setting, and again in any of the counsellors in the room, you know that we have to stay adult even in that setting. You can't, when somebody's there very, very distressed, you want to, but you can't go and wrap your arms around them, because often they'll stop talking. You need to stay adult and listen to them. And if somebody starts abusing you or getting very angry, even though you've got the tears are very close to your eyes, you can't have a tantrum yourself. You can't get angry back. You need to stay adult. And this is what you want to practice in amongst you within the relationship. Here's some examples again. Here's when you've got somebody parenting their partner. You ask your partner to ring the plumber because the toilet's blocked. Did you ring the plumber? No, sorry, I completely forgot. I'll do it tomorrow. You're kidding. Why can't you ever do what I ask? How hard is it to make a simple phone call? I know, I'm sorry, I'll try harder. I promise I'll remember tomorrow. Somehow I doubt it. Notice I didn't put a he or she on this one. Very clever. But can you see here with this, I know, I'm sorry, I'll try harder, I promise, that's a child response to that very parental, why can't you do what I ask? How hard is it? Look at the same thing when you're not parenting your partner. Two adults. Did you ring the plumber? No, sorry, I completely forgot. I'll try to do it tomorrow. Or would you have time to do it? I could, but then I'd still have to check with you about the best time for him to come, so it's probably easier if you do it. No problem, I'll make a note and get onto it first thing. Two adults discussing a problem. Fight averted. Here's another one, very common situation. One person comes home late, the kids are still up and the house is a mess. What on earth is going on here? Why are the kids still up? Am I expected to come home and start cooking dinner? That's so unfair, you've got no idea what sort of day I've had. It's not that hard to get the kids sorted and cook dinner. It can't always be up to me. Why don't you just go back to work? We don't need this. Again, can you hear? It may as well be a parent talking to an adolescent, mightn't it? And that's the dynamic that's going on. Again, same situation. Wow, looks like you've been busy. What are you up to? What can I do? Yes, it's been ridiculous. I'm so behind with everything. What would you rather do, start on dinner or get these guys up to bed? Again, another example of which couple do you think is going to be closer that night? Yeah, the second one who's not parenting. Further strategy again on communication, because as we know, a lot of it is about communication, is what I like to call owning your own problem. And I think this is one that some people find really hard to accept, really hard to practice owning their own problem. Here's a classic example. There's a pile of dirty washing on the floor. And the kids and one particular spouse walks over that pile of washing to get to the door, get to the other room. She thinks, what am I, the slave around here? You're just expecting me to do it? Why can't you do it? Why can't you even see it? Why, you don't respect me. You think it's only your job. Getting pretty worked up thinking about it myself, actually, that pile of washing. But the truth is, they don't think you're their slave. They don't have any, they're not lacking respect for you. They don't even see the washing. It's not even in their mind. So the key is, if it's bugging you, it's your problem. If wet towels on the floor bug you, that's your problem. Toilet seat up or down, your problem. Noisy neighbours, whatever it is, it's your problem. It doesn't mean it's your fault. It doesn't mean that you're the one who has to fix it. It doesn't mean that you're the only one who has to do anything about it, but it means that you're the only one with the incentive to address it. You have to take ownership of it to address the problem, because if you try and just give that problem to your partner, they won't take it up because they don't know. Good example with my husband, who is known amongst our friends as Poor Andy. Anyway, Poor Andy, we were having, when it was our 40th years ago, we had a joint dinner party for 20, crazy, and I was doing the cooking, crazy, and doing individual fish pies, super crazy. So I've got a tiny oven. What was that? Anyway, disaster. But I was doing this, so expectations completely unrealistic. Getting all very stressed as the time approaches. Andy comes in, gorgeous man that he is, and says, oh gosh, you look stressed, what can I do? And I said, oh, for goodness sake, just pick a job. There are so many jobs, to do one of them. Bad. So I go back to doing everything. Then, about 20 minutes later, I realise I haven't seen him for a while. So I walk into the other room where the table's laid out. very funny, I can still picture him. He is, sounds like I'm really scary. Anyway, he's down on the floor in the corner with a dustpan and broom, just sweeping up imaginary dust. Which was great because it made me laugh, because I said, what are you doing? And he said, I don't know. I thought if I just did something, it'd be okay. So I said, oh, I'm sorry. Could you please get out some glasses? Can you go and get me some ice? And then he said, sure, willing to do anything. So often I had to own the problem that I had ridiculously planned to do all this work and had expected him to know what everything was in my head. There is no way, and there is no way he deserved for me to get cross in any way. But once I owned the problem and got him to help, excellent. So here's some examples. Look at the difference between ways of initiating these. Look at these different opening statements. You treat me like a slave. I'm sick of doing everything around here. As opposed to, I'm feeling overwhelmed at the moment. Could you help me by taking that dirty washing to the laundry? Again, you don't have to take the dirty laundry to the washing. You're just asking somebody to do it. And as I said, a lot of people have trouble with this because they say, why should I ask someone to help me with my job of doing the laundry? No, it's not your job, but it's bugging you. If the other person doesn't care if it sits there for ages until they go to wear it, then they're not going to see it. So if it's annoying you, then it's your problem. Why should I have to decide what to cook for dinner every night? As opposed to, I'm all out of ideas, can you suggest what we have for dinner tonight? That's it, we're never having people over, and this is all me, isn't it? That's it, we're never having people over again, I do all the work. I'm finding entertaining stressful. Could we sit down and work out who does what when we have people over? This isn't me. If I didn't initiate sex, we'd never have it. I'd love it if you'd rub my feet for a while, or perhaps we could just sit together on the couch. I just want to be close. Again, owning the problem, whatever's bugging you on whatever element, own it, address it in the way, that classic start with I statements, and you get the person far more on board, far more likely to get what you want. As I was saying before, when we're talking about commitment and that bubble of new love, and really important to spend enough time together to understand, really important to accept each other's faults. As a couples counsellor, this one distresses me but also makes me laugh a lot, because it really amuses me to hear how often that the thing that's really bugging you about the partner is the thing that you are crazy about when you first got together. It's often exactly the same characteristic. For example, the laid-back young man becomes the lazy husband. That ambitious 30-year-old is then known as a workaholic. So is he attracted to that ambition, drive, it was wonderful, and now, all you care about is work. The young woman who's full of energy and great ideas, that's me, becomes a control freak. Again, what's wrong with that? Just love it. The generous person is then known as being irresponsible with money. The 25-year-old with a mortgage is later thought of as being tight with money. Okay, so you can see, if it was the other way around, if somebody was really, really generous and that's what you're attracted to, then later they were really tight and they controlled all the money and didn't want you spending anything, then you think, well, hold on, this is not what I signed up for. But what we normally hear is this, that you often say, right, you think he or she's irresponsible with money. What were they like when you first got together? Oh, it was wonderful. He paid for everything and it was all, well, same thing. And this one I often think is the saddest. This gentle man that she was often, I can't tell you how often I hear this one, is later thought of as not being tough enough. That she's saying, I wish he'd just, I won't say it, grow. Anyway, she really wants him to toughen up. I know my audience, I tell you. Anyway, in therapy, I always ask couples I ask them what attracted you to each other. And we start that off very quickly, because I keep that in my, up the top of the page, so that when the complaints start coming out, I can say, oh, this sounds familiar. This is what you loved a couple of years ago. Anyway, so accepting your partner's faults, really important. Essential conversations. I'm sure anyone who's done the Prepare course or who is facilitating it in any of the young engaged couples here, or the older engaged couples, yes, know that it's really important that there are essential conversations that need to take place. I, again, find it so gobsmacking that couples can get married and not have discussed things. It's amazing. Even, do you want children? Some couples it's amazing. They don't even discuss it beforehand. They just assume. One person assumes they wanted children, the other one presumed that they knew that they didn't. Again, how many children do you want, if possible? Again, it's something that comes up that people presume we both came from a family with 4 kids, so we're going to have 4 kids. And the other one says, no, I never signed up for that. So these essential conversations. Where will you spend Christmas each year? That's a big one. Again, I find that couples are arguing over that. And you think, did you discuss that before you got married? No? I love this. These two are discussing where they're going to spend Christmas. It's great. Excellent. Sorry, sprung. How are you going to manage the family finances? Who's going to manage it? Who's going to pay the bills? What are you going to spend the money on? Incidentally, just for the record, but I'm a big fan of the joint bank account and one person managing that. And I often think the best manager, just again my opinion, but the best manager is the one who's more of the spender. Because if you get the spender to manage the finances, then that's when they get awareness of what's coming in and what's going out. Whereas if you get the one who's more of a saver to manage, then there can often be this issue of control. The spender feels like they're being controlled by this spender who's keeping it all, and the spender's thinking, well, if I can't let you have it because you'll just lose everything. Whereas, as I said, it's about that managing the family finances together, having these essential conversations. Again, what you're going to spend your money on, talk about it, and even if you didn't talk about it before you were married, talk about it now, keep talking about it. How often do you want to see friends and family? How much me time do you want? These sort of things need to happen, and they need to keep happening, because sometimes it changes. Some people at a certain stage of life take up a new interest, and they suddenly, they take up sailing or golf or quilting or something like that, and the other person's really resentful because they've always been there. So it needs a quilter. Lovely. Anyway, so essential conversations. Really good one to be good role models for the kids. If I've got a tricky couple that I'm seeing, and it's always wonderful, it's wonderful to work with couples full stop, but particularly when they've got children, because it's such a great incentive. Because if you see your relationship through the children's eyes, you get a better sense of having that incentive to change. Because what do you want your kids to see? You want your kids to see 2 adults. You want your kids to see respect. You want your kids to see that love and commitment. It doesn't matter. We know that kids are not badly affected if they see their parents argue. That's fine. Obviously no abuse, definitely not, and no personal attacks and no contempt in that John Gottman speak, which is wonderful. But then if they see you argue over something, and then they later, if you say something like, sorry, we were a bit upset, but we've had a good talk and we've worked that out and everything's fine, that teaches them, oh good, that's fine, they love each other and there are arguments. Whereas if they never see any argument or resolution, then sometimes they can be a bit frightened if they come across it. So it's really good to think about what sort of, always when you're speaking to each other and addressing life's issues, just be aware, even if the children aren't in the room, just be aware of what are they seeing, what dynamic are they seeing here, because they are going to pick that up and they're going to take that into their relationship. As I said, their expectations are going to be based on your relationship too. And just finally, I wanted to share with you, having seen so many couples over the last 20 years, which is such a privilege, but I would think that I've learnt 5 things that I think are the absolute key to increasing your chance of having a happy marriage, apart from the empathy and the validation I was talking about. But these are just 5 little tricks that really help. Happiness habits. Firstly, treat your partner as if they're the most important guest in the house. I met this lovely couple who'd been together for 65 years, and I asked them what the key to their success was, and their idea was just so simple and lovely. They just said, that they didn't wait for visitors to come to bring out the best china and crystal. They saved that for just when they were together, and they gave the guests all the everyday crockery. How nice is that? They greeted each other with just such warmth every time they were reunited. Not when they left the room, but when they just came in from a day or a weekend away. They really treated each other as the most special person, and they felt truly special to each other. I thought that was such a beautiful little trick to remember. Because why do we do that? Why do we put the red carpet out for someone who's not as important as our spouse? Share any important news with your partner first, whether it's good news or bad news. I think this is a really key factor to keeping you close. Even if you're with somebody else when you get some good news about a job, or when I was incidentally with my oldest friend, long-term friend, when she found out she was pregnant, and I could tell because I won't tell you the details, but I could tell that she was very excited with her first child, and I was going, not listening, don't tell me, ring your husband, because I didn't want to be the first person to know. Tell your husband that first. Also tell your husband or wife the first bad news. If you had a really hard day, or you've some issue at work, or you've really lost your job, something like that, even if it's hard sometimes because one person's hard to reach because of work or they're travelling, it's even more special if you save it up and you're bursting to tell this news until you speak to them. Because you think about it, if you have already told your mum and your bestie and anyone at work, and then when you see each other at night, how's your day? Okay. It's not bursting to come out of you because you've already shared it. So keep it for each other. Have shared rituals that just you and your family does. I know Friday nights when I was growing up was really special. No one went out because it was such fun at home. We had beautiful Friday night dinners and movies and games, and I've tried to put that into my family too, because it's just such a lovely ritual that everyone looks forward to. But any way you can just, the way you sign off a phone call just with each other, or an email, or watching a show together regularly on a TV show every week, or going to the same restaurant every year for your anniversary, anything, just so long as it keeps those times sacred. You don't do those things with anyone else. Really lovely for the relationship. Really important to keep the humour alive. It's just so important to lighten things up whenever you can. Laugh with each other, be silly, have fun, tease each other gently, reminisce about funny times, tickle, chase, anything, just anything to keep you smiling, because it does get very heavy, doesn't it? Day-to-day life can be, really weighing you down sometimes. So if you can keep that humour alive, again, really healthy for the relationship. And lastly, just having some shared interests. It's really important to have your own hobbies and your own interests, your own me time, that's true. But it's also good to have those activities that keep you connected. I talked about golf before. I took up golf when I first met my husband 28 years ago because he was a mad golfer. And I thought, I might take that up too. And that's something we can do, and we're looking forward to when we're both retiring, that we can play more golf together. That's just, he plays far more than me, and he's good and I'm not, but that doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. The good thing is there's a shared interest. The older couples, get obsessed with their caravan, or their, driving up from Canberra today, as I said, from seeing our son. I just thought it was love, so many caravans and just couples in there, coming back from somewhere, and I'm, fantasising about how lovely that looks and how much I'm looking forward to doing that. So whatever it is, it doesn't matter as long as it brings you together. And lastly, there's a shameless plug for my new book coming out next week called Detox Your Relationship. That sounds very now, doesn't it? I thought detox. Anyway, it's all about how to, it sounds very negative, but it's not, all about how to get rid of the things that may be harming your relationship and injecting all the things that we've talked about today.